Here.
Trustee Alexander,
Here.
Trustee Bloom,
Here.
and Trustee Polito has a work commitment right now, so she will join the meeting when she's available. So quorum is present. We will now move on to our first item, which is the approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda? I see none, so I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Through the chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
Roll call, please.
President Latu,
Aye.
Vice President Shibomahine,
Aye.
Trustee Alexander,
Aye.
Trustee Bloom.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. And also, this is just a note to the public that this meeting is being recorded, if you haven't noticed in the agenda as well. So now we're going to go to 3, which is the closed session. Before we go to closed session, I'm going to open it up to anyone wishing to address the board on closed session matters may do so at this time. I see that we have 2 hands.
Yes, Brahman, do you want me to promote them?
Yes, Solomon, you haven't given me permission to promote them yet.
Oh, I did. I did give you permission.
So Mr. Lynch, you are promoted. And you may speak when you are ready, Mr. Lynch. Jack Lynch?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Lynch.
First thing I want to ask is if I can get a time extension from the 2 minutes that I'm understood that I get. Is that, oh, you guys aren't allowed to speak? Okay, so basically the first thing that I wanted to mention, I guess, then was I was searching to see if, what the closed session meant and if it could be open and, what kind of talk time I would get. And I just came across something that I'm curious about, that being a law. And I would rather have an attorney discuss this, but I was told that will take a couple days. So basically, this was on the Legislative Council Bureau website, State of California Education Code Section 89307, effective January 1st, 2013. It says, as a condition to holding a closed session on specific complaints or charges brought against an employee by another person or employee, the employee shall be given written notice of his or her right to have the complaints or charges heard in an open session rather than a closed session, which notice shall be delivered to the employee personally or by mail at least 24 hours before the time for holding the session. If notice is not given, any disciplinary or other action taken by the legislative body against the employee based on the specific complaints or charges in the closed session shall be null and void. So I don't know if that plays, but I'm not a law degree, but it sounds, I did not get that, to be clear. I was not offered to, I was not given anything that allowed me to make this into an open session. I am probationary, which means there's no need for a reason to fire me. I read up on that, and it says that because I don't have vested interest in the school. I just happens to be that I have a vested interest in the school. And, still feel okay after this. Absolutely. Like if you could still, look me in the eye, I don't know, decisions probably already made, but at least I can get some things off of my chest because I've been wanting to be heard.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. I'm sorry.
I please have an extension of time.
Can we put another minute? I'll grant you a minute, Jacqueline, so you can finish your.
Okay. basically, from what I read, there's two ways that I can be fired. I know that's a word we avoid, but it's a firing at the end of the year. The first one, it's assumed performance related. I met with my manager for the first time, and I received an exploring grade on January 29th. I was fired on February 12th. That was my first meeting with my manager of the school year. And I know, having 9 years of teaching behind me, that, when my student fails, there's some ownership on me as well, that I didn't put effort forth to grow them, etc. So I didn't feel great about that. I do have utmost respect for my manager, and trust me, she didn't feel great about that either after speaking. Second reason is that it could be complaint related. February 3rd, between a received letter accusing of race, gender, mansplaining, bullying, all of those that really hit home for me. And sorry, I have to speak fast, but I was never told of an investigation, was never given a document. Nobody wanted to meet and hear me speak on that. There was no notification. I was told nothing. Did not hear from the person who complained, and basically ended up ended up firing me, not anybody else, without any preface or warning.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Thank you. Of course, the board can't reply back in real time right now, but we will look into this. Thank you. I believe we have Fernando Rodriguez.
Hi, Fernando. I am promoting you to a panelist right now. You may speak when you're ready. Mr. Rodriguez, are you there? Through the chair, if Mr. Rodriguez is not there, should we move on?
Hi, Mr. Rodriguez. You can unmute yourself. You have the ability to unmute yourself right now if you wish to speak. Can we see if we can promote him? I noticed he's been kind of jumping back and forth.
Okay, I've promoted.
It's possible his internet is unstable and it's not going through.
Yeah, Solomon, I keep promoting him and it's not going anywhere. Okay, it looks like he's in as a panelist now. Nope, he is not.
No.
So we will continue on. So we are going to close session at 6:41. To the public, when we come back, you will be able to speak on matters that aren't agendized. So this can be your time to collect your thoughts, and if you want to speak, you may do so at that time. So we will go into closed session at 6:42, and I see that Mr. Rodriguez is back. Hi, Mr. Rodriguez, are you available to unmute yourself right now? I noticed you unmuted yourself for about a second. So in respect to time, we will continue into closed session at 6:43 and we will resume at 7:20. I'll see you on the other side.
No. I.
We will give everyone a couple of minutes to tap back in, and then we will resume open session. And we are back. Welcome, everyone. We will resume open session at 7:20 p.m. I will start by reporting back on the conversation that happened in closed session. So for item 3A1, there was conversation and action was taken. Motion was carried 4-0. For 3A2, there was conversation, action was taken, and motion was carried 4-0. So now we will move on into item 5, which is from the floor. And so if anyone has any questions or anything that they would like to address to the board, now is the time. You can talk on anything that is not on the posted agenda. So if there is something that is on the agenda, this is not your time, sorry. So yes, we will open the floor.
So through the chair, we have 2 speakers. Fernando Rodriguez is back. Fernando Rodriguez, I am going to promote you to panelist. Solomon, I don't think I have permission to promote.
So while our tech team troubleshoots some of that, this is just a reminder that this meeting is recorded. We do have Spanish language translation available. And so those things are available.
Fernando's promoting unmuted, and Bronwyn, you have permission now. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
So, Mr. Rodriguez, if you're there, you may talk.
Hi, Mr. Rodriguez. You're available to unmute yourself.
Rodriguez, if you're there.
Oh, we heard you for a second.
Through the chair, I believe that was feedback of me. He might be having glitchy internet.
Through the chair, maybe he could chat, put something in the chat.
Yes, so apologies, technical difficulties, but Mr. Rodriguez, if you can enter into the chat, we will forelay that your comments, because I think we're having a lot of technical difficulties with trying to unmute you. So we will give you a chance to type, and we will move on to the next speaker.
Through the chair, Fernando Rodriguez has put in the chat, hola a todos que están muy bien. If you want to add more, Mr. Rodriguez. Oh, and translating, hello, everybody. I hope you are well. Would you like me to continue reading, or should we have our translator do that?
I think that if he's still writing his comment, we can wait until his comment is complete. And then we can read it all at once. But in the meantime, we will move on to, I believe it's Mr. Lynch.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
How much time do I have?
2 minutes.
Hold on, I have to get my screen after the change there sorted out. Can I have 2 questions before I start, or is it already started?
It started.
How much time?
2 minutes.
Okay, I thought it was 5 this time. No.
No, so for public comment, and you can reset it back to 2 since I'm
Okay.
gonna just address this. For public comment, every single person has 2 minutes unless they're granted an extension by a board trustee. So I will give you back a couple of seconds and we will start from 2 minutes now.
May I have an extension? Yeah. The first time that I had a voice in all of this, I was given 2 minutes. None of the parties were on a clock like this. The matter's already decided, and I had 2 minutes. Not one single person that decided to fire me or complain about me or whatever it may be. I don't even know.
I'm sorry, Mr. Lynch.
right.
This is the part of the agenda that we're in now is from the floor in regards to matters that aren't agendized.
I'm sorry, the chat said if you needed to speak on an item. I don't know if my time's going on. I didn't want to interrupt you, but
Yeah, so we can pause the time, but you're kind of continuing on something that's on the agenda. It's in closed session. And so for things that are on the current agenda, your time was before we went into closed session. So for this section of the meeting, which is from the floor, this is to address issues that are not on this current agenda.
okay. It said an item in the chat. Okay.
But if you're talking about something different than what you were talking about earlier, you can continue. If you're not
Okay.
talking about what was talked about during closed session.
Okay. Earlier in the year, out of concern for something like, out of just concern in general, I asked what it would, at the end of the year, what would success look like? How would I know I had a good year? And I was told that the people that I'm coaching come back the following year. I don't know how that what students weren't brought up, but was just where it was at. And I can't really say much more about my 2 minutes I had earlier, so.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Are you concluding your comment or?
Yes, everything I want to say is, I think I'm not allowed to say right now. So my notes kind of got thrown out. It's kind of the trend here, but. We have, a staff of people that really do care about social justice and not silencing people. It's just difficult.
Sorry, I apologize,
Oh.
Mr. Lynch. Your time is up.
Oh, I'm not sure why the sound's on, so I thought I'd speak.
Okay, thank you so much for your words. And we will move on. If there's another speaker, we can continue. Mr. Rodriguez, if you're continuing to write your message in the chat, we can read it out. Just let me know when you are finished. Do we have any other comments from the floor before we continue? So we will conclude item 5, and we will move on to item 6. Oh, I'm sorry. Trustee Alexander, would you like to read Mr. Rodriguez's comment? I apologize before we move on.
Mr. Rodriguez put in the chat, quería saber al respecto qué acciones se tomaron durante el año para que sucedan mejoras. And then he added, Jacqueline, ¿sucede algo? Solicito que le dan más tiempo. Does our translator want to translate that?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you, David. Yes.
Mr. Cardenas, can you hear us to translate?
Trustee
Go
Trustee
ahead.
Bronwyn, you have to select English.
Oh, yes. You have to be on the English channel to hear the translation.
Go for it.
Okay, because I don't know where the English channel is. So do you want me to translate it? Or did David do it?
David is doing it.
Okay.
So while we wait for David to troubleshoot, we have a hand from the floor. So if we can promote Ms. Ophelia Bello, and we will give her the floor.
Ms. Bello, you are promoted.
Hi, y'all. This is not Ophelia. This is Tonga Victoria. I am so sorry. I'm on the Yuka home account, so just ignore that. I didn't even know that. I just wanted to come on here and first of all, appreciate and honor our new board of trustees. My apologies for not doing so earlier. I saw the agenda just a couple minutes ago and recognized that there will be a recognition for Black History Month, but I wanted to put on y'all's radar. Earlier this week, Stockton Unified School District, or at least the board, had presented a resolution to rename Black History Month as Indigenous History Month. And so there are negative implications because of that. And I just wanted to bring that to the table as a way to seek solidarity from our own school board district. As we know, much of our families that do get displaced out of East Palo Alto do move to areas like Stockton and Tracy. And so we are indirectly impacted by that. And so, sorry for the baby, but I just wanted to put that on the board's agenda to please be proactive in this effort to show solidarity to our Black families and youth around this really crazy resolution, if you ask me. And so I just wanted to say that again. Thank you so much for time.
Thank you, Tonga Victoria. Do we have translation ready?
David is ready to interpret. All we need to do is make sure that we are on the English. We click the English button.
Sounds good. Thank you. Okay, so I do notice that we have a hand, but to my knowledge, you're only allowed to talk one time unless you serve multiple roles like RTA president and resident. So unfortunately, we will move on to item 6. Which is the consent agenda. Sorry, my screen froze for a second.
Yes, it is the consent agenda.
And also, just going back, the next board meeting is March 11th, 2021. Just a note. So yes, for the consent agenda, item 6, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Through the chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda, item 6.
Thank you.
I will second.
Roll call, please.
President Latu,
Aye.
Vice President Shibomihi,
Aye.
Trustee Alexander. Aye.
Aye.
Trustee Bloom.
Aye.
And the motion carries 4-0. So now we will move on to item 7, which is a special recognition. During this part, I believe Trustee Ana Maria was going to jump in, but unfortunately she has a work commitment, so she'll be on when she's available. So I will pass it on to Superintendent Sudaria. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Allow me please to adjust my screen so I can see my presentation. Okay. President Latu, if you can give me a thumbs up if you see the PowerPoint, that says great, thank you. Okay. To the trustees, we are excited to be able to recognize staff today. We have a strategic priority, number 6, where where it indicates that we work collaboratively and share responsibility for our core values. And part of that strategic priority is to develop an initiative to recognize staff who exhibit core values. Our core values, there are 6 of them: integrity, student-centered, innovation, excellence, empowerment, and respect. And for this month, we are recognizing staff who embody the core value of innovation as an integral part of their character as determined by a blind majority vote of the committee. And the recipient will receive a certificate and a personalized coffee mug as well. And so we are going to begin to recognize our first staff member. Tina Collier. She is a CTE Makerspace teacher at the Cesar Chavez Ravenswood Middle School. And it states here by Robert, a 6th grade PE teacher at this middle school, I nominate Tina Collier for her outstanding overall work in creating interesting projects and events for students to engage, compete, and construct at home and outside. Tina exemplifies hard work, dedication, and commitment that embody the core values of CCRMS. Tina promotes creativity and curiosity that sparks the learning and growth that the students need and want. One student of mine is proud of his robotic model that he constructed in Tina's class. The project was finally completed and he felt good about the robot that was quite impressive looking. Tina also holds the students accountable and teaches responsibility and other character traits that all students desperately need. She assigns productive projects, exposes students to outside competitions, and is a valued member of the electives department. She has taken the lead for electives and other areas of remote learning, initiating thoughtful ideas to help assist teachers and provide a great experience for students. And I believe we have Tina here in the audience before we move on to our next. Could we promote her, Solomon? Please.
She's being promoted.
Awesome. Tina, if you don't mind turning on your camera so we can put the face to the good work. It might be Chuck. There she is. Thank you, Tina. And I had an opportunity also to observe Tina in action as she, during this pandemic, is able to provide competitions, robotic competitions for our middle school students across the grade levels in the middle school. So thank you, Tina, for making that happen and providing a productive learning environment for our kids even during this time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Do you have anything you'd like to say? Don't want to put you on the spot.
Just that we have 4 kids that have made state, so we're excited about going to state next weekend.
Yes, we'll make sure we recognize those students as well and highlight their success.
Okay. Thank
Stay
you.
on, Tina, don't go anywhere yet.
Okay.
Our next teacher that we are happy to recognize is Kyle Tana. She is our 7th grade ELA social studies teacher at Cesar Chavez Ravenswood Middle School. She is one of our founding teachers of the Ravenswood Middle School. And she was nominated by Luis Dezudi, a 7th grade teacher, a colleague of hers at the middle school. So Ms. Tana has shown a great facility for creating lessons using electronic technology to its utmost benefits. She has imagined and made numerous slideshows, which has engaged students into trying lessons with interest and creativity. Kyle has kept a flexible attitude during the difficult days of distance learning by trying to find best approaches to teach our 7th grade students all the skills they need for success. Through this time, Ms. Tana has remained undaunted in her pursuit of clever and innovative ways to reach our students. With great alacrity, Kyle has caught the attention of our students while also being an excellent example for our new teachers on approach and focus on the best possible outcomes. She is a true asset to our community as she continues to invent, test, assess, analyze the best possible lesson plans for English and social studies. That is Kyle Tana. Is Kyle in the audience, Solomon?
I just promoted her.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Am I able to see? I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Stay muted.
Did it work?
Through the chair, I see her there.
Oh, I see. Akita Tana.
Miss Tana, are you there?
That might not be Kyle, it might be someone else.
I believe that would be her.
It is? Okay.
Well, we will make sure we highlight Miss Tina and Ms. Kyle, in our next publication of our newsletter, as well as in our social media outlets, so that staff and community know our innovative teachers. And we actually had a privilege of observing Kyle as well in 7th grade class today. Our instructional cabinet had an opportunity to see her deliver lesson on The Outsiders using video clips, using and creating her own slides of documents for students to be able to access the curriculum, along with them having the text in their hand and recreating lessons in for the format of distance learning. And they've also done a lot of work in the 7th grade around social justice and being able to amplify student voices. And that's led by Kyle Tana as well. So fantastic work to both. And thank you so much for representing us and taking care of our babies.
Thank you both so much for all your hard work. We will move on to 7B. which is the consideration to approve resolution 2021-17.
Yes, I think this is very timely. We have next week an opportunity to recognize our classified employees. March 1st through March 5th is Classified Employees Appreciation Week. And it just seems fitting as we approach our anniversary of flipping the way we do instruction and doing remote learning. From day one, our classified staff have been in the forefront, extending themselves to the community and the students. And I can't be more grateful for the work. And we have our CBO and also our consultant with the Child Nutrition Education here to say a few words for our staff. And I believe we have several of our, do we have some of our senior workers? Well, I had an opportunity to meet up with them today and just to thank and express gratitude. But Will and June, please.
I'll go first, then pass it over to June. I'm sure he's going to be more eloquent than I am. But I just want to echo Gina's comments. This has been a really difficult year, especially for some of our folks in MOT and our custodians who've been sort of constantly adapting to new COVID changes on the fly. They haven't missed a day of work for the most part. They've been here every day on campus, getting our sites ready for when students come back and making sure that staff have a good environment to come through. Solomon, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit to the tech side, but I just also highlight that the tech rollout has been sort of largely led by our classified staff who have done heroic work in getting just an amazing amount of laptops out, distributed throughout the whole district. So it's really just been sort of all hands on deck all year round from sort of a whole bunch of different folks. And I'll kick it over to June. I think hopefully Solomon will jump in as well.
Oh, it's me. Good evening. June Richardson. I oversee the Child Nutrition Department. Yeah, I just want to validate and just celebrate our classified team. I see them as an orchestra made of custodians, bus drivers, IT, educational assistants, our secretaries, our kitchen staff, and hard to believe that we actually made it through 2020 and that we're actually going to be celebrating a year. March 16th is the date that we actually started, especially in our Child Nutrition Education Department. And even though it was really challenging, I feel like our frontline, they were our frontline heroes for our district. And they were resilient, they were flexible, it was a learning curve for everybody. There was tremendous teamwork amongst every department. And I think most of all, it was everybody's collectively their drive to be there for our district students and their families and our families and community of East Palo Alto that really continues to make it successful. And I can't imagine without them how we would have survived. And I'm just so very proud of all of our classified employees.
Solomon Hill, Director of Technology. I'm really proud of our tech staff, our CSEA staff in particular, because they're used to being pretty important members of the team, but all of a sudden, last March, they became absolutely critical, and just core instruction couldn't be done without their help. And they really stepped up. They came in. They served families directly for the first time. They're used to working with teachers, they're used to working with staff, and used to working with students, but not parents. So that was a new experience for them. They stretched their linguistic ability, right? They really stepped up, and I'm really proud of the team. And they've been very positive, and they're looking forward to the future. And so thank everyone. And I'm going to show them a video recording of this.
Yes, I just want to reiterate just our appreciation. And the district cannot function without the classified team, and they help us make one Ravenswood. And the foundation also recognizes this as well. So all of our classified staff, even the ones that are still working remotely as well, across the board, are going to receive a $25 gift hard. So thank you from RAF for showing their appreciation as well.
Thank you. So during this time, I'm going to open it up if the board has any comments or notes that they would like to say.
Through the chair.
Trustee Bloom?
Yes. So as a parent in the district as well, I definitely want to say my daughter has mentioned the classified staff to me as well. Like the other weekend, she said, I think I saw the person that gives me the food at the park. I was like, how do you know it was him? And she like described like this whole story about this conversation she had with him. And it was just like, even in the like just getting their lunches, they are making a difference. And I think that that's really important to me as a parent to know that my daughter feels connected not only to her teachers and to the hub, the people at the hub that are helping her, but also to our classified staff. And so I can just say that that is something that is truly important, and you are making a difference and making the kids feel like this is part of their community as well.
Through the chair.
Trustee Alexander?
I would like to say that as a classroom teacher for many years, I couldn't have done it without the classified staff. From the days that I forgot my keys to I forgot to bring a lunch and the cafeteria was able to help me. They are my neighbors. I still, when I was walking by the school today, I saw Miss Castro out in front of Bellhaven and was able to even talk with Miss Castro at the second grade materials distribution time. And the classified staff is the backbone of any school district. And if it wasn't for them, we couldn't do our jobs. And they are so valued to all of us. Thank you, classified staff, for everything that you do.
Through the chair, I also wanted to make sure like phone calls are still being phoned in to the school sites, and many phone calls have been made from the schools to the homes to make sure that we find all of our kids who may not have logged in that day, and that would not have been possible without our office staff, our campus relations, school support staff who are also making those endless phone calls. So I want to make sure we extend our appreciation out to all the folks who are making those individual phone calls and still having the school run at the sites.
Through the chair, I also just want to add one note to Trustee Bloom, and June was very helpful in being able to pull us, but we have now distributed 808,500 meals this year through our community and through the hard work of the C&E team packaging, combining, distributing, and really rethinking kind of on the fly throughout the year of how to actually do that meal distribution. So just really amazing work, and glad that sounds like your daughter's enjoying it, Trustee Bloom.
You know, just to add in to everyone's sentiments, I spent 4 years at some of the schools, previously Ronald McNair and CCRMS, and you all do amazing work. We're all part of this functioning body, and we're all moving towards the same goal. And I just want to say thank you for everything that you do for not only the staff, but also for the students and the families of our community. So now I will transition and open it up to public comment. I see that we have Rhonda White. So if you would like to speak on item 7B, you can use the raise hand function and we will promote you and you will have the floor.
Rhonda White, you are now promoted.
Sorry, I'm having tech issues. I just wanted to say thank you to classified staff. I will not try to name them because I'm bound to forget someone, but I like what Randy says. From the time our babies wake up, whether that's the bus driver or the crossing guard, that's a classified employee. When they walk across that campus, that's a yard duty or campus relation. When they come into that office because they need to call home, that's a secretary or office manager. When they go into that lunchroom, there is a cook or a C&E worker. When they are in that classroom, there's a paraprofessional. And I don't want to forget IT and anyone else, but I just want to say from RTA's perspective, we know we cannot do this job without you. And we are so thankful and so blessed to have you here, continually working beside us so that we are able to teach and we are able to reach all of our students. We thank you most importantly because many of you live in the community and you're able to see and connect with our students on an even more personal level. And I do want to give a special shout out to the technology department because getting out as many computers as we have and hotspots and problems and broken and return, nothing's perfect, but we did what we needed to do for One Ravenswood, for our community, for our kids. And for the C&E workers, I mean, it's amazing when you walk down the street and you see families with their bags of food. If you're coming on certain days, we already know there's a holiday, so we have enough food for today, tomorrow, and the weekend, and the holiday. And the things that are packaged are either non-perishable. So it's just, it is not amazing. It is what One Ravenswood does, and we could not do that without Classified. So from the bottom, sincerest of our hearts as teachers, we appreciate you, we love you, and we look forward to continuing this relationship. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no more hands, so I will entertain a motion for 7B.
I will make a motion to pass 7. Do I need to read it, the resolution, or pass 7B?
Trustee Bronwyn Alexander would read it.
Okay. I make a motion to pass.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
I believe we need to read part of the
Oh,
resolution.
sorry. We can, sorry. Trustee Alexander, can you please read the resolution or part of it?
Resolution acknowledging March 1st to March 5th, 2021 as Classified Employee Appreciation Week. Whereas the education of youth is essential to the future of our community, state, country, and world. And whereas classified employees are essential and valued members of our school district. And whereas classified employees work directly with students, educators, parents, volunteers, business partners, and community members, and a lot of other whereases.
Roll call, please.
President Latu.
Aye.
Vice President Shabomihin.
Aye.
Trustee Alexander.
Aye.
Trustee Bloom.
Aye.
The motion carries 4-0. We will move on to 7C, which is the Black History Month acknowledgement. And I will pass this back to our superintendent, Sudaria.
Thank you. As we all know, February marks Black History Month, a tribute to African-American men and women who have made significant contributions to America and the rest of the world in the fields of science, politics, law, sports, the arts, entertainment, and many other fields. I'm not sure if you're aware, but today you may have been informed in our newsletter that we have had staff across the sites make effort to highlight Black History Month, as we know how much acknowledgement and representation matters. And so there was much work around amplifying current individuals who are making an impact in our culture and in our communities. And so please take a look at the newsletter. We would see Principal Robin from the Castaños School of the Arts giving morning announcements relating to core values. And then the 7th and 6th grade classes also have recorded several videos highlighting Amanda Gorman, Congressman Lewis, Huey P. Newton from the Black Panther Party. I would like to take a few minutes to show a video that I had put together highlighting the Black leaders in our community here directly in Ravenswood City School District. Could someone respond if they see the play screen?
Good
Yes.
to go.
Thank you. Go.
Thank you, Superintendent Sidaria. That was a wonderful film. I will open up for comment. Do we have any comments from the board or from the floor?
Through the chair, I'll just say, great job recognizing Black History Month. We see I've got the background because I just came from before this meeting, another Black History Month program. And so I'm glad that the district is acknowledging this month. And to the point of the speaker who said something earlier, I don't think right now, anyway, we have any intentions of changing Black History Month here in Ravenswood. So yeah. So thank you, Gina, and for the team and everyone who made the video, and acknowledge folks who are working in the district on behalf of all of our students who happen to be African American.
Thank you. If we have no more speakers, we will move on to item 8, which is from the superintendent's office, and I will pass it back to Superintendent Sudaria.
Thank you. I'm closing a few screens here so I can find you all. I must have done something where I hide your faces. So I don't see your reactions, so I can see the chat, but just please let me know if you have any questions as we go through this information that we would like to provide you an update on Back to Campus and how we are progressing with bringing urgent learners on campus. We'll also provide COVID update around the current conditions, vaccines, as well as the antigen testing. We'll also give you an update about our urgent learners being on campus and any additional classes as well that we would like to propose to you for you to consider for approval. So what's great about this chart here is that we have seen a significant decline in the number of cases and the positivity rate, not only in San Mateo County, but also in East Palo Alto. The blue line is San Mateo County's numbers, and the green line are East Palo Alto's numbers. This is a line graph. On the next chart is a bar graph that shows the similar information. And you can see here that because East Palo Alto, Ravenswood, is below the 25 new cases per 100,000, we are now in the light purple. When we presented to the board in February 11th, we were using data from February 7th that had East Palo Alto, you see here, over 50, around 70 it was per 100,000. So positive cases, new positive cases are declining. And then you can also see here the positivity rate for both the city and the county declining. Before, I think we had presented earlier in the fall, our positivity rate being 3 times that of the county. And you can see now that we are about leveling up. The county now is in the red tier. And once the county is in the red tier, we would be able to consider bringing students who are in the 7th and 8th grade as well. Currently, local schools in the area, we have Kent Valiant, who is bringing small groups back on campus March 8th after their spring break, I believe it is. And they are going to be offering TK4 students in the hybrid model. And then Sequoia Union will resume in-person instruction as well, April 5th. I'm sorry, I don't believe KIPP spring break is after March 8th, March 8th, because that's in a couple of weeks.
Sorry, Gina. KIPP has our same spring break, so they'll do the small group and then the hybrid.
Awesome, thank you. And then Sequoia will resume in-person instruction on April 5th. And then they will also have opportunities to return in person as well. And then some will have the opportunity to remain fully in distance learning. And then we'll continue to contact other schools. We're in contact with the primary school, and we're reaching out to other charter schools to stay informed with what their process and plans are. So we wanted to highlight too during our presentation when we were acknowledging the CSEA staff members, because we were so pleased to learn that the county has identified a process that is equitable and is anti-racist by identifying our district and other districts who have a high number of unduplicated pupils. Those students who have are primarily on a free and reduced lunch, our English language learners, and our students of foster. In the foster program. And so all of our staff who work directly with students on campus were identified and were on the 1A, 1B list, and they got vaccinated yesterday. And we have confirmation right now based on just feedback about 71 of our employees having received the vaccine. And we believe more of the individuals on the list did receive their vaccine, but we're just waiting for them to respond so that we can document. And the county shared with us that over 2,000, almost 3,000 employees, education workers yesterday received the vaccine. And they're expecting additional 900 to 1,000 education workers to receive the vaccine. We believe that individuals on group 2 as well, from our priority list, those are staff who report to work, but don't necessarily work directly with students, have received the invite, as a few cabinet members have as well. So all Ravenswood employees and Learning Hub staff who work directly with students had that opportunity to get vaccinated, and we're trying to promote that as much as possible, highlighting, sharing photos and videos of staff getting their vaccine. And we believe that most of our staff will receive the vaccine by over the next couple of weeks. So hopefully by the end of March, potentially, we would be through our group 3 lists, which are individuals who are working remotely. Right. And we also, just to ensure that we identify staff who do want to take the vaccine and make sure they're on the priority list, we did send out a survey asking if they've already gotten the vaccine or if they're opting out because they choose not to take the vaccine. And we're very pleased to learn there's been very few who said that they're opting out. The rapid antigen testing has been taking place. So all school and Learning Hub staff have been trained to be able to administer the test. The testing has already started at Castagna School last week with the students who are doing in-person instruction in the TK class, along with our unique learners. And this week and next week, we'll communicate with families to get permission to test students, specifically students in our Learning Hubs. And we're aiming to phase in the testing at most sites next week, and then make sure by mid-March we're fully fully implementing the testing for students. And the pilot is to go through April. Remember, it's to be an 8-week program, but we are pretty hopeful that we're going to be able to extend the testing as we need. Okay, so we're happy to give an update on our urgent learners on campus. So currently, Los Robles Ronald McNair has what we call, I guess, Learning Hubs on steroids, but here Learning Hubs Plus, which launched this week on Monday. A third Learning Hub opened on Monday, and so there are 3 kindergarten Learning Hubs at Los Robles Ronald McNair. Miss Cuellar there, who's photoed in the top, actually is pushing in small group reading instruction. And while she is teaching, if you notice right here, there is what we call an owl, and it's literally a camera that moves around and follows the speaker. So while she is teaching, the other hubs are able to follow her instruction. More importantly, the Learning Hub staff who are observing Ms. Cuellar's lesson are able to support the students in the other Learning Hubs with the similar instruction that Ms. Cuellar is providing. And we're excited to be able to provide transportation for 3 of the students in need next week. We also have a kindergarten class that started today. We are anticipating the start date to be yesterday, but because the campuses were closed for our staff to be able to get the vaccine, we waited until today. There was a parent meeting last week that the school site had. Ms. Decker and Principal Robin held to inform families. 12 out of 23 students are attending in person. And if you recall, when we made the presentation about the proposal, Ms. Decker uses her computer to do live instruction for those students who are learning remotely for specific periods of the day, so the whole class is together. And then she does hold small group instruction synchronously as well with students who are remote learning. And then our 6th grade newcomers, we're still not going to be able to implement or bring the 6th graders onto campus at this moment. The teacher is waiting to be vaccinated, and we anticipate her being able to be vaccinated based on just the turnaround time that our staff are receiving notifications to schedule their appointments for the vaccine. So we are going to, we anticipate hopefully being able to start late March. I'm crossing my fingers, but we'll make sure we keep the board apprised. In addition to proposing to bring classrooms for in-person instruction, if you recall, I did inform the board that our 3 Learning Hub organizations pursued a grant through the county, and per that grant, they were able to bring on more pods at each site. So the 49ers Academy is going to be able to add 2 more pods at the Cesar Chavez Ravenswood Middle School, which would equate to about 17 additional students. Those 2 pods will start March 8th. And the main focus is to hone in on 8th grade newcomers. And then the East Palo Alto Tennis and Tutoring are going to be able to bring 2 pods or provide additional 2 pods, but they will be hosting those pods at St. Francis just due to this lack of space at the campus. And they're going to start their pods in March as well. And they'll be able to add 32 students, 8 per pod. We're not guaranteed that all of our students from Ravenswood will fill those spaces as they serve other students in the community as well. And then the Boys and Girls Club is adding 7 more pods for approximately, to be able to serve approximately 70 students, including new kinder pod at the Los Robles Ronald McNair site. And then Los Robles pods, 1 will start on the 22nd, which happened this week. And then we're hoping to support 3-5 newcomer class as well, which we will present to you shortly. And Castaño will have 2 pods that will start, 1 already did this week, and then also on the 8th. And then Bellhaven will have a pod that will start March 15th, and Ravenswood Middle School's 2 pods will start March 15th as well. We currently have just about over 200 students in our learning hubs, and so we are excited to be able to expand those numbers to close to 300 students. All right, we are going to present another class to the board. And if you recall, we would like to make sure that the board considers when we do this, when we present the proposal, that we've met these criteria, that we're considering the safety, quality, and equity of the program that's already in place, and also what we would like to propose. So we have to ensure that we're following the cohort guidance. And also we want to make sure that the program enhances what the students are already receiving and doesn't impact the distance learning that currently is going on. And that hopefully will address also the equity piece as well. Okay, so we would like, well, let me share a little bit more, that the School Improvement Working Group did support the learning for 3rd through 5th grade newcomers to come onto campus. And we will have Lara Berenin share a little bit about the newcomer proposal for 3rd through 5th grade.
Good evening. So to share a little bit more about our proposal for our 3rd through 5th grade newcomer class, I think some things that are helpful to know are that the class currently serves 16 students in the morning in the virtual class and 14 students in the afternoon in that virtual class. Castaño students in the morning and Bellhaven students in the afternoon. Asia Burns is our newcomer teacher this year, as she has been for several years now. And in order to make in-person learning possible for these students, she was willing to be flexible in the class configuration. She's really eager to see her students in person, as she has been since the fall, actually, and she's really excited about the possibility. So thank you for considering the proposal. Well, the proposal we're bringing to you today is actually to move the virtual instruction to the morning so that she could serve one cohort in the afternoon. So due to the grouping guidance from the state of California, we can have a maximum of 16 students and staff together in one stable group. So if Miss Burns is one of those people, and then 2 possible Learning Hub staff members for the morning portion of the day, we could serve 13 students in the afternoon. And Ms. Burns is really confident that having in-person instruction will really enhance the experience. Really give students a much greater opportunity to learn and practice their English skills, have more visuals, and then of course all the other benefits of being in person. And as we sort of mentioned, just repeating there that we would then want to be able to offer a Learning Hub in the morning so that from the parent and student perspective, the students are able to have on-campus learning for a full day. And for those students who are in a Learning Hub in the morning, they can still log on to their virtual classes with their homeroom teachers at that time and do distance learning that way, and then in-person learning with Ms. Burns in the afternoon.
Thank you, Ada. All right, so we wanted to know if the trustees had any questions about the third through fifth grade newcomer proposal. I'm going to stop my screen so I can see everyone's faces. And just as a reminder to the public as well, President Latu, we have Trustee Alexander and Trustee Bloom, who's also on the School Improvement Working Group.
So I will open the floor to comment from the board. If we have none, I will also open the floor. I see we have public comment. We have a hand raised.
Through the chair, do you want to go to public comment now?
Yes, I see no comments from the board.
So I am promoting Ms. Gabriela Aguilera to panelist. I'm hoping I didn't send her away. She has disappeared.
Yes, I do not see her.
It has not reappeared.
Uh-oh. I guess we will move forward. So since we don't have any other additional comments, for 8A1, I will entertain a motion for the consideration to approve the proposal to bring more urgent learners on campus for in-person instruction.
Through the chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve item 8A1.
Thank you.
I will second.
Roll call, please.
President Latu,
Aye.
Vice President Shibomihi,
Aye.
Trustee Alexander,
Aye.
Trustee Bloom.
Aye.
Thank you.
The motion carries 4-0, and we will move on to, you addressed 8B, correct, in your?
Yes.
Okay, so we will move on to item 9, which is from the business department. So I will pass it on to Mr. Eager.
Good evening, trustees. Full business department slate tonight, so I'll try and move with all due haste here. I'll start us off just by providing a brief update of sort of where we are currently thinking about the SY21-22 budget. We've been doing sort of behind the scenes a whole bunch of work here and want to sort of give you a sense as to where we are right now. I also just wanted to help orient everyone to sort of where we are in the overall budget cycle, right? So obviously over the summer, we approved the budget. Sort of late fall, early winter, we give a first interim update of just sort of here's how the budget's going so far in the year. Then we actually start the next budget cycle. And so that's kind of where we are today. So sort of in orange is the budget cycle for SY21-22, next fiscal year, whereas in blue is the budget cycle we're currently in. We're going to come back at the next board meeting in 2 weeks and give you an update on sort of where our budget for the current fiscal year 2021 is. So that's happening sort of March 11th. Then we're going to actually turn back to SY21-22. We're hoping to get budget approval, but sort of the process will go through sometime this summer for the SY21-22 budget. And then we'll also, in early fall, close out SY2021. So we'll kind of wrap up, close the books for 2021. Now, one note, we'll actually end up doing the year-end close for this year probably a little bit earlier. Normally, this is when it would happen, but this year, due to the pandemic, they sort of extended some of the auditing deadlines, you may remember. So we actually won't, normally we close our books in the fall, winter. This year it's pushed back a little bit towards the spring. And that's not a Ravenswood specific thing. That's a statewide sort of policy decision. So got some feedback after the last budget presentation that'd be helpful to sort of sum up the whole long presentation in one slide. And that's what I'm going to try and do here. So I'm going to try and give all the information that you need to know right here. And then we'll sort of go through some of the details here. So the first thing I just want to highlight, SY 2021 has been a challenging budget year just due to the sort of unusual circumstances we find ourselves in with the global pandemic. 21-22 is going to be similarly just difficult to forecast. And we just remain in a time of much greater than usual uncertainty on a global level, a state level, local level, just in terms of what our expenses, what our revenue will look like. So I think while all forecasts generally come with some pretty significant, possible range of outcomes, I think this year is just, there's a lot more of that. What we have seen though, is we've seen our enrollment drop significantly from last year to this year. Some of that's likely due to the pandemic, but we think that most of that's likely due to the sort of final phasing up of a couple of charter schools and the primary school. The good news is I think we have another drop next year as a couple of schools come online, but then it should start to level out. We should sort of arrive at more of a steady state where we may still see some population driven declines, but it won't necessarily be because other schools are adding more grades at those times. What's a little bit unusual about sort of where we are right now, in a given year with fewer students or in a period of enrollment decline, we'd see less revenue from the state. And we'll talk more about this in depth, but it's not actually going to happen next year. We are going to be held at our 1920 enrollment levels for another year. And so what that means is our sort of enrollment's getting held over another 2 years, while our actual enrollment, our enrollment related revenue is holding steady while our enrollment is declining. And what that means, it kind of sets us up for in 2 years, a pretty significant cliff. And so we'll talk more through the specifics of that, but we're sort of actively managing now with that cliff in mind, but knowing that next fiscal year will actually be a little bit better than you might sort of expect given the enrollment declines we've seen. The other sort of just bit of news here, due to the enrollment declines and due to the rapid increase in property values in East Palo Alto over the last couple of years, we just flipped into Basic Aid. There's sort of two certification periods, P1 and P2. And in P1, we flipped over from LCFF to Basic Aid. We'll talk more about what that means, but at a high level, it actually means relatively little. we're expecting to see about $500,000 or so in additional revenue in this fiscal year, but we expect to flip back to LCFF next year, and that money will go away. So it's sort of another chunk of one-time funds coming in that we expect not to be with us sort of in the long term. That said, given the sort of rising change in demographics, hard to forecast what's going to happen with EPA property values, what's going to happen with enrollment, what's going to happen with state education funding levels. But if things continue the way they've been going, it is likely that we may end up being sort of more firmly in basic aid in the future. And lastly, I think a lot of the earlier bullets have actually talked about sort of rising money in the short term. And I want to just be really hyper clear with the board and our community that while we've seen rising revenue, the sort of national consensus or what national experts are expecting us to see in terms of the dollar value of the need, and I trust my academic colleagues to describe the level of need and the steps we're taking through learning acceleration to address that need, likely is much larger than the actual revenue that we're seeing. So while our sort of total revenue may be going up, I wouldn't want anyone to walk away from this meeting thinking that, wow, it's so nice to see a school district that finally has enough money, right? I don't think that's where we are. That's sort of not the correct read of the books. And so I just want to make sure that's sort of hyper clear, and we'll talk more about that in depth. Any questions before you go in? I saw some reactions on various parts of things. We are going to go more in depth on them, so maybe we could save some of those comments for then, but I'll pause now in case there's any sort of burning questions. All right. So here's sort of the things I want to tick through. I'm going to go relatively quickly through a couple of these sections and sort of pause where there are questions, just knowing there's a lot of information here. So we'll talk through some of the governor's budget update. We'll talk through declining enrollment. We'll talk through that basic aid piece. We'll talk about sort of the role of stimulus, and we'll sort of wrap up this section just on the overall budget context we find ourselves in. We're talking about rising student need. And then we'll flip over to be a little bit more mechanical and talk a little bit about just the process we've taken so far and the process we see going forward. I'm not going to read all of this, but I just want to highlight a couple of sort of big things in the governor's budget. I also want to just highlight that the governor's budget is a proposal. It is not the state of California's adopted budget. And so this is sort of the governor's first stake in the ground. It gives us some interesting information as to where the political winds may be blowing, but it's not necessarily great, let's go get that money right now, right? There's a whole lot more that needs to happen there. So a couple of just big things to highlight. As mentioned before, the hold harmless provision we'll talk a lot about, but that's hugely important for us. As is the fact that for next year, they're forecasting a much bigger cost of living increase, a COLA, almost 4%, 3.84% is what they're sort of forecasting for at this point. As a reminder, this year they factored in zero COLA. And so part of the reason that next year they started this year forecasting right when I think got hired, I think they forecast negative 2.5%. They then raised that around the first interim to 0%. And now they're forecasting sort of 2 years of compounded COLA in 1 year. They're also making a bunch of sort of a clear focus of the governor appears to be in early childhood. So he's called for investments in TK programs and in increasing preschool spots. Some of the details we're still sort of working through. It's a little bit not 100% clear exactly what will end up coming out of these proposals, but it does signal sort of a longer term interest on behalf of the governor to invest in early childhood, a position we obviously are very supportive of. There's also just been a lot of investment in COVID and learning acceleration on behalf of the state and the federal government. They're proposing a number of grants to help address what they're calling learning loss. There's also grants to help schools reopen, which I think has been certainly in the news and certainly is relatively controversial, as well as some additional federal funds that the governor is expecting to receive overall. I'll pause now for questions. The governor's proposal is relatively long, so I may not be able to answer any questions, but happy to keep the board sort of updated as we go here or keep moving. I'm going to take Trustee Alexander's throwing that forward. So we're going to keep us moving here. Looking at enrollment, we talked a little bit about this. the district was obviously quite a bit bigger, and we've seen, especially from 1819 to 1920, a fairly steep drop. The sort of slope of that line has gotten a little bit steeper and continued this year. And then we do expect another sort of meaningful drop, but you can see that slope of the line is starting to level out there, right? And so when I'm sort of talking about our estimate that long-term enrollment growth will stabilize, that's kind of what we're talking about. One thing I'd highlight in this, enrollment forecasts are tricky and difficult. What we're doing here is relatively simple and straightforward. We're sort of assuming the number of third graders we have are going to be the number of fourth graders we have. The number of fourth graders will be the number of fifth graders. So there's no sort of overly complicated math. We're doing something relatively simple and straightforward. It does mean that I think we're most vulnerable to predictions at the kindergarten level, right? Where that's sort of those underlying demographic trends are really driving sort of overall kindergarten enrollment. And I think through the work of Superintendent Zidari and the whole team, I do think there's a good chance that we could see enrollment decline or enrollment come back through a lot of the initiatives that we're offering. But right now, all I'm doing is sort of forecasting, number of third graders being the number of fourth graders. So with this sort of forecast decline here, this brings us to what I think is probably the most important part of the governor's budget. And we think this part's, 99% likely to happen. So in a normal year, when you see declining enrollment, you're allowed to use your prior year's enrollment numbers for budgeting purposes. So in SY 2021 this year, we're actually funded based on our SY 1920 enrollment numbers. Now, what normally happens is you then are funded on your prior year's enrollment numbers. So in SY 21-22, we'd actually be funded based on our 2021 enrollment numbers. But instead, what's happening is the state's decided to allow us to use our SY 1920 numbers as our SY 2021 numbers, meaning that in SY 21-22, we are effectively using our SY 1920 numbers. That has the effect of giving us sort of more money than we'd expect next year, but does mean that we're going to see 2 years of enrollment declines coming true in 1 year. This is a graph that I basically stole from School Services of California, and they've been calling this the sort of cliff. And I think that's actually a fairly apt name for it. We're going to see our revenue drop much more significantly than it would have otherwise. To sort of put some numbers to that, here's sort of our forecast LCFF enrollment. And this is sort of our funded ADA. So in a normal budget year, what we'd see here is sort of a gradual decline, right? And it would kind of mean that we have to stay honest to sort of budget based on our prior year enrollment. But what we're going to see next year is this big sort of level funding, right? So instead of our revenue going down more like this, we see it held harmless, which sets us up for a pretty big cliff. About $4 to $5 million in sort of lost revenue here, we will see a $4 to $5 million drop in revenue here. Any questions just about the declining enrollment and the impact of that in our overall revenue picture here? All right. Let's talk a little about basic aid, and I'll start by just talking about sort of what that is. And I'm sorry I didn't put a site. This is from Ed 100, I believe. Sort of in our budget working group, I had another graphic to describe basic aid, and I was told that I should use this one. I think that was a good suggestion. So what basic aid is the state basically sets a amount of money that they deem sort of the right amount of money for a district to have. And that's kind of depicted here as a cup. And districts put in some basic property taxes. And if their property tax amount doesn't sort of fill up the cup, then the state takes steps to top them off. And if the state needs to take steps to top you off, you're what's called an LCFF district. If the state, when sort of pouring in the property taxes into your cup of sort of what the state deems appropriate, overflows, right? So you have more local property taxes than the state deems necessary to meet your minimum funding level, you're allowed to keep the additional funding. And that is sort of what determines you as a basic aid district. It's fairly rare statewide. The vast majority of districts statewide, I don't know the specific percentage offhand, are LCFF districts. So they're sort of topped off by state funding. That said, when we look around us, almost just as the majority of districts statewide are LCFF districts, the majority of districts locally fall into this basic aid category. So San Mateo County is sort of an unusual part of the state in that it is predominantly basic aid districts. Any questions about the overall sort of approach here? I'm sure that trustees are familiar with this, but in case there are any questions on behalf of the community. So what does this mean for us, and perhaps how did this happen? So I talked about this earlier. I think the main way that this happened is we saw pretty significant property tax increases over the last couple of years in East Palo Alto. I think overall property tax revenue went up by 18% last year. And the other big thing that happened is when the state is considering whether or not a district is a basic aid district, what they use the denominator is number of students in the district. And that determines sort of how big your cup is. And if a student moves from a district school to a charter school, they kind of stay in that cup. But if a student leaves for a private school, they would sort of leave the cup, so to speak, and the cup would shrink, the size of the cup would shrink. And what happened with the growth of the primary school is it ended up moving a lot of students to what is effectively a private school. So it decreased the overall enrollment in the district much faster than I think anyone expected. And so that changed the size of our cup, which meant that there was more liquid overflowing out of the cup. So for the first half of this year, we are projected to have more property tax revenue, so we're a basic aid district. We think we're likely to flip back in next year, and some of that has to do with the way the county calculates something called supplemental funding, which will end up flipping us back. The good news is you always kind of get what's more. So you either get more, if you have more basic aid, you get that. And if you have more LCFF, you get that. And so what that means is this year, we're going to get about $500,000 more through the switch to basic aid. Next year, we think we'll flip back. And the year after that, it's hard to know, but I think there's a chance, as we kind of show here, that will actually end up flipping back into basic aid funding. We think that orange line will be bigger than that blue line. And we think the gap might actually be substantial enough to maybe have that last at that point. But again, very difficult to say, very difficult, especially now to forecast property tax revenues 3 years out. One thing I do want to note, basic aid districts only receive revenue from the county, not the state, the county, twice a year. When we're an LCFF district, we receive state funding every month. It doesn't actually matter in terms of how much money we receive over the course of the year, but just like if you were only paid twice a year instead of paid every month, you'd find yourself kind of maximizing your credit card a little bit more. Wouldn't change how much you got paid, but it would turn out that, if you only got paid half your year's salary in June and then had to make it to December, you might find yourself feeling a little crunch for cash at various points in the year, unless you were able to budget very, very tightly on your cash management. Many basic aid districts do what's called a TRAN, and I'm trying to remember what it stands for. I believe it's a temporary revenue assistant note. And what that basically is, it's a short-term loan that allows states to sort of allows districts to bridge the times between those payments. Right now, our cash forecast is pretty strong. And if we had stayed LCFF for the entire year, we wouldn't anticipate any issues. There's some small chances, as we sort of look carefully at our modeling, that next year, depending on if we stay basic aid, we might run into some issues. And due to some sort of quirks in the way that the governor's deferrals go this year, there's a small chance that actually if we switch back into LCFF, we could see some cash flow disruptions later this year. We've been monitoring this very closely for a couple months. We've been working very closely with the county. We think the odds are low. And I'll also reiterate that this sort of has nothing to do with anything that Ravenswood has done, but more sort of the way that the deferral sort of process has gone. So hoping this won't be an issue, but sort of naming now that we're talking about it and we have some steps that we can talk, or we're taking to sort of make sure that this won't be an issue. Just putting on your radar that if we are to switch to basic aid sort of longer term, one thing that most basic aid districts see is sometimes of cash disruption at various times throughout the year. Gina, also, Superintendent Sudaria also very helpfully clarified the TRAN note is the tax and revenue anticipation note. And basically what that is saying, we know the state's going to give you the money, we know the county's going to give you the money. Here's a very safe, low interest loan to help sort of bridge some of those cash flow questions. That was a lot of information, very in the weeds at times. I'm sure there may be some questions on this. I'm also happy to sort of follow up individually with trustees or members of the community about any aspects of this. But overall headline, small amount of new revenue, potential cash flow disruptions down the road. I'm a little surprised there's no questions, but I will keep us moving.
I'll talk through the chair, Mr. Eager. I don't have a question. Well, you actually answered my question. It was about whether there was interest attached to that loan, which sounds like there is, which is a shame because it doesn't make any sense to me why you'd build a system where you get paid twice a year and then you have a deficit for an organization that can't make revenue. But anyway, and it's like, so what are you supposed to have? We're supposed to somehow save money in cash reserves, but then if you're being underfunded, so the whole thing just makes a hot mess and for a great dissertation for someone. But yeah, so no questions from me, just disappointment. Not in you, but in our country system. Sorry.
I have a question. So when you say create cash flow down the road, do you know like how far down the road? Do you have an estimate? Do you or is it just like, we'll see?
It's a little bit of we'll see. So there's a couple of pieces to down the road. So longer term down the road. So say we were District X who had been basic aid for some time. To Trustee Bomaheim's point, if we managed our cash flow very carefully throughout the year and we had no issues with that sort of running a budget deficit or anything like that, we were just on top of our game, we should never have to issue a TRAN note. We should just have to monitor. It's kind of like having like high blood pressure. It's kind of thing that hopefully if everything goes well, you just sort of keep an eye on it and you're fine. So when I say sort of cash flow issues down the road, that's part of what I mean. The second piece of what I mean is a little bit sooner. And it has to do actually of us flipping from basic aid in P1, which we were, to LCFF in P2. And what's weird is, as Superintendent Starr, I think, put in the chat, there's about 100 districts who are basic aid. We think that there are 2 districts statewide that might flip in P2. Us and Belmont Redwood Shores. I wish I hadn't said that second part in case, I think that's public knowledge. But 2 districts, both in San Mateo County. If we were to flip, because of the way that the law around the deferrals has been written, it could result in a scenario where the county takes their money back at the same time the state has taken their money back. And the state, through their deferrals, will refuse to give us the money that they took and should have given us back. This weirdly does not create any budget issue in that we still are promised the same amount of money. And so our budget will actually show either, as we talked about at first interim, either a small surplus or a small deficit. But we'll create a cash concern of all of a sudden everyone is sort of asked for their money back with the promise of giving it to us on the first day of the next fiscal year. We think there's a small likelihood of this. We've been monitoring it very carefully. And we actually have a plan, which we'll talk about a little bit later, to sort of a neat solution in our capital budget here is to actually issue the set of bonds that we're planning on issuing for CCRMS, which we need to authorize to make that project move along. But by issuing those bonds, it actually gives us the cash on hand to cover that possibility. If it covers that possibility, we may still need to do a TRAN. And Trustee Spomahim, I think, speaking of good dissertation topics, we would need to issue a TRAN that would actually only cover us for about 6 hours on the last day of the fiscal year to the first day of the next fiscal year. There's a whole bunch of other solutions that we're working on for this because that is such a goofy, convoluted answer to a silly problem. But we're sort of working on it. We're hoping it won't be an issue. And we're sort of just monitoring the situation very, very, very carefully. There is not a world where we won't make payroll. As far as I've yet to hear a scenario where that'll happen, which is sort of the biggest thing you worry about with any kind of cash issue. And the other thing that I'm sort of fighting tooth and nail on is I don't want to pay interest to any bank to cover the costs of what I view as a policy failure. So we're fighting hard to make sure that we're not going to pay a dime of interest to any kind of for-profit bank to cover anything here. And again, I do want to reiterate, we think this is a relatively low probability event, but just want to make sure that the board is aware of it as a low probability possibility, and one that we've been sort of monitoring carefully, and one that has nothing to do with anything the district has done. This is all sort of a series of fluke events that are affecting literally 2 districts statewide. It was a very long answer to a short question there, Trustee Bloom. I apologize for that.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Sorry, with respect to time, Mr. Eager, we can kind of table if anybody has additional questions. We can kind of circle back, but yes.
Wait, mate, I'll keep us moving. Couple of things, I'll tick through this quickly. I think, as many of you know, we received a large amount of stimulus money. Here's just sort of the status of that. I just wanted to name that. We have received a decent amount of money. Some of it is a little bit sort of more flexible than others, but we have about $6.7 million of anticipated or received stimulus money. I wanted to put that in context just to some estimates we've seen. So there was a recent report from Education Resource Strategies, I believe, ERS, which is sort of a think tank that did some work with us earlier in the year. And they have been looking at the leading experts in district finance. They've been thinking about how much money does a district need to help students fully coming back from this? Like, what's the right amount of money we would need just to support students? And what they found is that, the first and second wave of stimulus funding, the first wave, second wave of COVID funding kind of covered the costs of buying laptops, doing learning acceleration, temperature screens, sort of the things that we needed to bring students and support students, either bring students back or support students distance learning. But they then said, well, you're going to need about $12,000 per kid over the next 5 years, in order to support them. For us, that's $18 million. And so this is sort of approximately to scale here, but that's what that looks like relative to the amount of funding that we've received. So in a moment, I'm going to show our per pupil spending over the next couple of years. You're going to see it going up. You're going to see it getting fairly high. But I think the thing to keep in your mind is there's actually a pretty big gap in terms of what we have and what we need. So putting some numbers to that, as I said, you can see our per pupil funding going up. A lot of that has to do with the influx of stimulus funds, the support of REF. This is all good news, things that we like to see. And this puts us sort of relatively high nationally. However, when you think about the needs of our students coming out of the pandemic, you're seeing some pretty big gaps, right? The gap between where ERS and other experts think our student need is and where our revenue is. Even including that stimulus fund, we're still seeing gaps in the short term, and we're seeing gaps in the long term. So if we think we need $18 million, as we talked about earlier in some of those stimulus slides, we do have about $8 million of stimulus funding that we've received or anticipate receiving. And that does mean that we have about $10 million we need over 5 years to best support our students, or to support our students in a way that ERS thinks would sort of be adequate. That's not, of course, the same as a budget shortfall, but it's sort of a need shortfall. right? If we think we need additional funds to best serve our students, or outside experts think we need this. We've been taking steps to think about how to best do that, how to bring in new money, whether that's through grants, whether that's through state funding, whether that's through advocating for additional stimulus. And we've also, of course, been working very, very closely with REF. We had a good meeting with them today, talking about ways to think about bringing in new additional funding sources to support our students here. Any questions on putting this all together? All right, let's talk process. So one of our biggest priorities for this budget season is really to be aligning our budget and our LCAP process. So just quickly, the local control and accountability plan, it's a state mandated plan for those of you not familiar. Each district does it. It's a publicly accessible document. You can see ours from SY 17-18. And we're currently in the early stages of working on our LCAP for the next 3 years. It's a great way to engage stakeholders across a whole bunch of different priorities: budget, curriculum, student supports. And I think it really helps create sort of a unified vision for the district, one that we're hoping and expecting will work really well with the strategic plan we developed fairly recently. As we're working on this process, we've also been working on some of the sort of basic blocking and tackling of creating a budget. So we've created a template, and we've been meeting with school leaders and also central office leaders to kind of help develop this. So here's sort of the process we took with school leaders. They created their draft budget. We gave them their budget for this year. We allocated some funds based on their enrollment. School leaders made some proposals based on those budget. They brought those proposals to cabinet for feedback. They revised the budget. They're now starting that sort of process of working on their LCAP goals and their actions based on student data and stakeholder input. Once we have the district-wide goals, the principals will create site goals based on those district goals. And then we'll come back and sort of make sure that their budget and their proposed changes to the budget really reflect those district-wide and those site goals. And then we sort of bring it back to the community. We continue to operate on that, continue to iterate on that process. And so the goal here with our SY 21-22 budget, start early, build in time to iterate, get community feedback. It's kind of the sort of process we're going through here. We changed up how we allocated funds a little bit this year with the goal of both increasing our per pupil amount and also sort of making it a little bit more even across schools. And so what we did here is we basically looked at the per pupil amounts that we used in SY 2021, and then we allocated that amount of funding to each school based on their forecast enrollment for 21-22. And by doing it that way, what naturally happens is you see kind of an evening across schools. And so kind of picking a couple of examples here, what we're seeing is the overall budgets across schools here has gone down. And the sum of all of these reductions is 1.8 million. And that includes things that are similar to, you know, if a classroom, if the school lost 30 students, you'd expect them to lose 1 teacher. We looked at it by grade, but that's sort of reductions like that. The other thing you'll notice is in SY 2021, these blue lines here, there was a bit of variation across schools in their per pupil amounts, especially in the elementary schools. And what we did in SY 21-22 by using a sort of more standard per pupil amount across schools, you'll see that it's more even here. It's not a very good line, but you can see that across the schools, that orange line's a bit more even, with the exception of CCRMS. And CCRMS is higher, and that's kind of on purpose, right? We're trying to make a very sizable investment in CCRMS to really invest in that program, knowing that all of our students flow through that school. And we want to sort of see what works at that school. And we're trying a whole bunch of different interventions. The Peary grant in particular has been instrumental in allowing us to try a bunch of things and iterate on those ideas. One sort of, I think, frustration that all of us share this year is the middle school has not been able to really see what that sort of significant investment would look like in person. They've, of course, done, I think, and Amanda's done an amazing job of being able to see some of this online. There's just been harder to see what it would look like in person. And so we are, at this point, recommending, you know, a similar amount for next year on a per pupil basis. That still does mean a slight decline in the overall funding levels for the middle school because of that enrollment decline. But that per pupil amount, kind of like it has the elementary schools on an overall basis, has gone up slightly. The other thing I'll highlight here is because Los Robles is a relatively small school, it is a very small school, there is slightly more funding at Los Robles, Ronald McNair on a per pupil basis than at our other elementary schools. So while we're close to even, we're not quite even, although we are more even than last year, in part due to just the limits of being able to totally even things out at a smaller elementary school. Any questions on some of this? I'll take through quickly, this is sort of the example of a type of budget tool that we've been giving to schools and school leaders to help just see their budget, see what they were spending last year, thinking about what they might be spending next year on a personal and non-personnel basis. We've seen just overall, a lot of our folks, a lot of our principals, a lot of our budget has been shifting money more towards personnel than non-personnel spending. Sort of just an interesting overall observation. That said, we still have seen overall reductions in our staffing levels. And so as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, I just wanted to follow up here and name it as part of the sort of SY21-22 budgeting process, is we are exploring a couple of different separation incentives for staff. So we've been working quickly with our union partners to help us think about how are we going to handle the decline in enrollment. We've talked about offering a 2-year service credit as we presented to the board, or the cash equivalent of that. So sort of the same net costs to the district, but just based on some feedback we received from our unions, gives our employees a couple more options here. As I think I touched on a couple of weeks ago, this program will have a one-time cost associated with it. On the RTA side, there's 22 eligible teachers. We don't imagine that all of them would participate, but if all of them did, we'd be looking sort of at that just over $1.5 million or so total cost. On the CSEA side, we're still working on the details of the program, but we expect it to be a bit lower than that. And we're hoping to have sort of a more specific numbers for you then soon. Although, of course, the specific numbers will be determined entirely based on the number of and the specific staff that participate in the program. As we also mentioned, just want to call it that this does reduce our longer term costs in 2 ways. So while it is a short-term investment, it is more than offset by the longer term savings. And it does in 2 ways. One, it reduces the number of overall staff. And 2, by offering this incentive to our more senior employees, it shifts out our most expensive employees and replaces them by people who are earning a little bit less. And that salary differential generally will offset a substantial portion of the cost associated with the program. And one last note here, we are exploring different ways of paying for this. Could be through the general fund, could be through outside funding sources. REF has had a long time commitment to supporting our staff, and I think they view this as a way to help our staff through some difficult times enrollment-wise, which obviously has very little to do with the actual staff here. Questions on this, or I'll keep going. All right. We did this at our budget working group, and we sort of talked through some of this, and I think some of the trustees at the end of that were relatively pessimistic. And there's certainly a lot of challenges that are the district's facing in the short term, both in terms of declining enrollment and in terms of rising student need. I do want to highlight just some positives. I want to just name them. One is that we think enrollment's going to level off relatively soon, and we'll be in a period where we're not going to be having to make these really painful cuts year after year after year after year. 2, I think we're working really hard on finding new ways to maximize our revenue and bring in new revenue, whether that's partnering with REF to think about learning acceleration in addition to their programmatic investments, or even thinking about compensation and working with REF to bring in new money through that, or whether that's trying to leverage existing grants or other partners, like we're going to talk about shortly on a whole bunch of facility items of how can we maximize the amount of money we can bring in to invest in our buildings. I think, outside of that, we're also working pretty diligently to explore new rental revenues, whether that's a 2120 Euclid or the flood site, as the board's encouraged us to look at our facility study session, or if we are to switch to basic aid longer term. Of course, through that, I think we're also thinking about how do we get to the right level of staffing that matches our enrollment, and how do we do that in a humane way. So I think the short term remains challenging, but I think, I really do feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel here. And if we can get through probably this budget cycle, which I think will be relatively painful, and I think the next budget cycle, which will also be difficult, I do think the district's going to be on fairly solid financial footing. And I think that's an exciting sort of long-term outlook that's important to keep in mind when we're going through what I think is going to be some difficult decisions over the next couple of months. That more or less wraps up this portion of the presentation. I'm a little bit out of breath, but are there any questions I can answer that we weren't able to touch on along the way? And then I have 2 process questions for the board. Well, I will go to the process questions. I think just to highlight some of our next steps, as I mentioned earlier, we have sort of a preliminary, roughly balanced budget. We're still working on a couple of details of things. And of course, we're going to do a continued amount of stakeholder engagement, whether that's budget for direct engagement, whether that's through the LCAP process, or whether that's through our budget website, which I'm excited to say we have a very, very solid, almost ready to share final draft. So look for that coming to an inbox near you soon. But we do have a couple open questions. One, our budget working group raised the question of, would we like to do an additional budget study session? So beyond sort of what we've talked about today, if the board feels that there's more information that would be helpful, we're happy to find a time to set that up or structure that in a way that'd be helpful to the board. And then just, I think we are working on a budget process here that's a little bit different. We're trying to make it transparent and engaging and student-oriented, student-based. But at this point, it might be too early to say. Maybe something we review at the end of the process. But if there's other things or process changes we'd like the board to see, perhaps different from prior years, would also be interested in hearing any thoughts on either of those.
Through the chair, I do think it would be helpful to have a budget study session, even though the information you've presented here is pretty comprehensive. I think it would be useful to have a session to talk through possible scenarios, right, to get ready for the cliff and the deficit that we'll see in the near future. So I think it would be useful for that versus having that in a regular board meeting. So. Regarding procedural changes, can't think of any right now. I'll keep thinking, but yeah.
Yep. Through the chair, I think that I too would agree with the budget study session, just because I think that'll give us as a board a better idea of, like, I think those 3 things that you had said before, right? Like the trying to figure out what are the proactively taking the right steps to make sure that we're balancing it and what that looks like, and also for the public to also hear and see what that is, just so that it's not surprising if we have to make staffing changes and stuff like that. I think that this will be helpful just to be well thought out and also transparent.
Yeah, just to add in, I do think we should do an additional budget study, especially something that's focused. So, so we can really dive in to minimize, kind of what could potentially happen, and just kind of have more of a game plan of, like Vice President Chibomhin said, like having scenarios, like what could potentially happen, and like minimizing kind of the negative side to this cliff, quote unquote cliff. Procedural changes, I don't really see anything, but I can always sit on something. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I'll definitely think through before our next meeting. Thank you, Will. That was a lot of information you just shared with us as well.
I hope it's helpful. The goal here is obviously to make sure that you are all sort of well equipped with the information. I know it's a lot. I hope it's not too much. I'm certainly trying to streamline and simplify a lot of very complex pieces here. Doing my best to keep you all well informed.
When it comes to
also
budget,
getting people to bed in time at a reasonable hour.
Yeah, budgets, it's a heavy topic. And so, we need to have these conversations. And so thank you. I really appreciate it. If we do not have any comment from the public, we can.
I have one last thing that I just want to make sure that I alluded to this earlier. I just wanted to name it. It's not necessarily related to our operating budget, but just on a capital budget piece. We are planning to, as I mentioned earlier, issue the next round of our Measure S bonds at the next board meeting. We'll talk through this more in depth at our facilities subcommittee meeting. This is all sort of approved by the public. This is sort of more of a routine process of the public's authorized us to issue over $90 million in bonds. We have some left that we have not yet issued as we've spent down our budget and in sort of anticipation of the RMS piece. Now is the time to kind of issue the next wave. So we'll be talking about that more in March, but just wanted to put that on the board's radar so it didn't come out of sort of left field in any stretch of the imagination. And that is my last note, sorry.
Perfect. So now we will move on to 9B, which is the consideration to approve an MOU between the Ravenswood City School District and the City of East Palo Alto to seek Prop 68 funding from the state of California. If we don't have any questions or comments, I will. Sorry, Will, you just took a breath like I thought you were going to say something. I will entertain a motion for 9B.
Through the chair, I still haven't quite figured out the wording.
I move to
I move to approve item 9B, consideration to approve the MOU between Ravenswood and the City of East Palo Alto.
Thank you.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Roll call, please. Oh, you're muted.
Superintendent, you're muted.
Thanks for the reminder. President Latu,
Aye.
Vice President Shibomaheen,
Aye.
Trustee Alexander,
Aye.
Trustee Bloom.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. We will move on to 9C, which is the consideration to approve the Magical Bridges Foundation agreement. Do we have any questions? Comments? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion for 9C.
Through the chair, go ahead.
Oh, through the chair, I'll make a motion to approve 9C.
Thank you.
I second.
Roll call, please.
President Latu,
Aye.
Vice President Shibomaheen,
Aye.
Trustee Alexander,
Aye.
Trustee Bloom.
Aye.
The motion carries 4-0. We will move on to 9D, which is the consideration to approve Resolution 2020-2021-16, determining that the Cesar Chavez Ravenswood Middle School project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act and approving the project. I will open the floor. I will entertain a motion.
I will second that.
Well, you want to make the motion.
I will make a motion that we approve item 9.
Through the chair, this
Oh.
is technically a resolution, so I believe you also have to read the first several words.
Gotcha.
Go through
Yeah.
the motion.
So I'll second, and then you can go ahead, Trustee Alexander.
And read it now? Okay. Determining that the Cesar Chavez Ravenswood Middle School project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act and approving the project. Whereas the Ravenswood City School District has developed the Cesar Chavez Ravenswood Middle School project, which includes a following of a whole lot of buildings and a bunch of more whereases.
Roll call, please.
President Latu,
Aye.
Vice President Shabomahin,
Aye.
Trustee Alexander,
Aye.
Trustee Bloom.
Aye.
The motion carries 4-0. We will move on to 9E, which is the consideration to renew the school facilities consultant SFC agreement. I will entertain a motion.
I'm not doing this one again. I keep messing it up.
Okay. I'm assuming there are no through the chair. I'm assuming there's no one's like raising their hand to speak on any of these.
I've been
since we're voting.
checking now.
Okay, cool. So I'd like to make a motion to approve item 9E.
I can second that.
Roll call, please.
President Latu,
Aye.
Vice President Shabomahin,
Aye.
Trustee Alexander,
Aye.
Trustee Bloom.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0, and we will, that was great, everyone. We made it through 9. So now we will transition into item 10, which is Board of Trustees. We will move to 10A, which is the consideration. I'm just opening it up right now, which is the consideration to approve resolution 2020-2021-13 board members excused absences. If there are no comments from the floor, I will entertain a motion.
Through the chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve item 10A for Trustee Pulido's absence.
Thank you.
I will second.
Trustee Alexander, can you just read the first sentence? Because I believe it's a resolution.
Yes.
Resolution 2020-2021-13. Whereas Education Code authorizes that each member of the governing board of this district who actually attends all meetings, et cetera, et cetera.
Roll call, please.
President Latu,
Aye.
Vice President Shabomahin,
Aye.
Trustee Alexander,
Aye.
Trustee Bloom.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. Now we will move to 10B, which is the consideration to vote for up to 3 candidates to the CSBA's Delegate Assembly, Subregion 5B, which is the San Mateo County. Just to note, there are 3 people on the list. So we could vote on all 3 like a consent agenda, or we can go one by one.
Through the chair, I actually so when I look through this, I don't see any information, and maybe I should have looked outside of this ballot, but I personally don't know anything about these candidates, so I feel a little uncomfortable voting, but so I don't know what to do. I don't know to vote for or against, but so I'm not sure how to navigate this one. Maybe other trustees have some information or advice.
Through the chair, I
Trustee
know that
Alexander?
I know that as teachers, we're often asked to vote for delegates to statewide union organizations, and most of the time we don't know who they are either. So we just made a decision you have to make a personal decision for yourself what you wanted to do. Generally, we would assume we have to take on good faith that these people are all qualified and willing to serve the duties that they are trying to do.
Through the chair, I know we were sent some of their bios. Yeah, I'll just say that. We were sent some of their bios via email.
Oh, I didn't see those. I'll look through that. Thank you. I did not see bios. I might just abstain, but
Yeah, I noticed 2 of them are incumbents. These are the only 3 options, correct? So it's, oh, there's no one else.
You would have to, through the chair, you would have to vote for one at least.
Oh, so only one person.
You can vote up to 3. And so if you were to vote for all 3, you would want to assess to see if the trustees were in favor of all 3. Otherwise, you would want to break it down one by one and vote on each one. So as Tam is not, as trustee Shabom, he may not be as informed. You may want to go as individual.
Yeah, I think we'll go one by one from the top to the bottom. So this would be a roll call instead of a, when we go one by one, sorry.
Yes.
Alrighty, so for
Carrie Dubois.
For Carrie Dubois, if you vote for Carrie Dubois, we will go through roll call for her. Roll call, please.
President Latu.
Aye.
Want me to, Vice President Shabomahid, would you like more time?
I'll abstain because I don't. Yeah, even with the bio, I don't really, which I don't see in my inbox, by the way. But yeah,
not to worry.
Even with the bio, I don't really know. Yeah, thanks.
Right. Trustee Alexander.
Aye.
Trustee Bloom.
Aye.
So we have 3 votes and 1 abstain. We will go to Gregory Land. Roll call, please.
President Latu.
No.
Vice President Shabomahid.
Abstain.
Trustee Alexander.
Abstain.
Trustee Bloom.
I will abstain.
So we have 1 no and 3 abstains for Gregory Land. We will move on to Dana Lujan.
Yeah.
Roll call, please.
President Latu.
Yes.
Vice President Shabomahid.
I abstain.
Trustee Alexander.
Yes.
Trustee Bloom.
Yes.
So we have 3 votes for yes and 1 abstain. So I believe that settles the votes for Carrie Dubois, and Dana Lujan. So now we will move on to 10C, which is board reports and communications. I see none, so we will continue.
I can say one thing just really, really quickly, that the mural that's being painted on the Bellhaven kindergarten wall is nearing completion. And in talking with the artist, we should be completely finished with everything on Sunday. And then the following weekend will be the final touch-ups and sealing it all off. So if you get a chance, drive by Almanor Street It's the kindergarten wall that faces Almanor in the Bellhaven neighborhood.
Thank you for that update.
Through the chair, I have a request, not an update. Superintendent Sudaria, would you? Is it, or actually a question? Because I see the candidate bios attached to the email that Nellie sends with the agenda, but the way I read the agenda, I go through like Agenda Online where it's like formally published for the public because I find that when we make changes, generally that's where everything is, the final version, versus going off of the emails. So can we ask Nellie to put those attachments on Agenda Online? Yeah, with the final
Yes,
version. Yeah, that would be helpful for me. Thank you so much.
no problem. Will do. That makes sense. You have all the
Unless it's
documents in one place.
Yeah, unless it's confidential, which perhaps this was. So in that case, I guess I understand. I know some things you can't put on, like when it's around, HR, but maybe
Closed session. But
Yeah.
these items, yes.
these are not cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other reports? I see none. Attendee, our next regular board meeting will be March 11th, 2021. And at 9:25 p.m., I will adjourn our board meeting. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Stay warm.
Stay well.
Thanks. Bye.
Solomon.
Bye.
Thank you,
night.
David.
Good night.
Thank you, trustees.
Thank you.
And Ravenswood team.
Go Ravenswood.
Bye. Thank y'all. Sorry for missing those bios,
Oh,
Gina.
no worries. No worries.
Yeah.
We'll take care of you next time. Make sure.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
It's just a habit because I know it always like the
Gracias,
agenda
David.
changes. So
Yes,
I always go
absolutely.
to, like where I know it's going to be permanent.
For
So,
sure.